Some blacks I don't want to be around. I can understand some of your parents too. They don't want to be with certain people, even with some whites. They don't want to be with those people. I said, you find that within the groups and then in the whole society. You find some people you don't want to associate with. So that's just a human thing. But I said, you just can't say all of those people are bad, because they all aren't bad. Records show that the first black residents of Las Cruces were two barbers, both named Williams. The next group that came were farmers or farm laborers, and they came in the 20s with some from families out of the South, and then some came on their own. My grandfather came to New Mexico in 1904, working for the railroad, and he first came to Raton, New Mexico, and while he was there, he met a businessman from Las Cruces who had a hotel, and he asked my grandfather would he come and be the chef at his hotel. That was the Don Bernardo Hotel. And so he came in 1904, 1905, and then he went back to Texas and married my grandmother in 1907 and brought her to Las Cruces. There were probably 2 or 3 black families in Las Cruces at that time. But they were the first to have a child. And their first child was my mother, Gertrude Hibbler. My granddad was Daniel Hibbler. My grandmother was Ollie Berry Hibbler. And their daughter was the first black child born in Las Cruces. She was born in 1909. She married him and came to Las Cruces on the condition that they would start a church when she got here. In fact, he came in 1907, and her minister came along with him to organize the church in the living room of their home. They had rented other buildings, and then in 1910, he bought a lot, the same lot that the church is on now, for $45. This house was occupied from the early 1900s until about 5 years ago. It has since been sold, and the people are in the process of remodeling the house. So you'll see plasters falling off, and the house is in kind of a bad condition. It's one of the oldest structures in Las Cruces, but I think they're going to tear it down. It needs a lot of repair. Now, I was born in a little 4-room adobe next to it, but now all you can see is the foundation. But we had a flood in 1935, and the water came through our house, so in 1936 they started building the one that you just saw. I started to school at Washington School when they were going in the 2 little tar paper shacks on the corner of Tornillo and Juniper. And the principal was waiting on the steps, and they told him, you no longer go to school at this building. You go to that little church on the east side, and that's where you'll go to. And there was a hole in the floor, and while the teacher was teaching the other grades, the little kids could sneak out the hole, crawl under the door, and go outside and play. There's an advantage to a 1-room school, because by the time you're 4th grade, you know all of what you're going to have to learn, because you've heard it in the 1st grade, the 2nd grade, and the 3rd grade. So by 4th grade, you ought to be a genius. We never had over 50 or 60 students, because about the largest graduation class would be 11. Usually with just 1 kid graduating, or 4 or 5 or something like that.
I went to Booker T. Washington School. It was grades 1 through 12. My 1st grade teacher was Mrs. Clarabelle Williams, who also was the first black female to graduate from New Mexico A&M College. I happened to be the only senior that year, and when the time for graduation arrived, my dad came to talk to the principal.
The principal came and asked my dad, since it's only one, why didn't she wait until next year? And they told her, no, she's done the work and she deserves a commencement. And she wanted a white gown.
And he said to my mother, Mrs. Fielder, he says, I just don't know what happened. Gertrude's gown did not arrive. And she very, very patiently said, Mr. Davis, If Gertrude's gown has not arrived by in the morning, Mrs. Davis had better make her one. She's going to have a gown.
The next morning at 6 o'clock, that principal was at my parents' house with the gown. I'm sure they already had it. and so she had her baccalaureate and everything, just one person.
It was no encouragement on his part to me, being a senior and graduating. It seemed like he wanted to just shove me back. And my dad still stood by his words that I deserved whatever any other child had had.
They integrated, after the law was passed in '55, the first year you could stay at Washington if you wanted to, or you could go to the school in your area. And a lot of parents didn't agree with the integration, so their kids stayed at Washington.
Overall, I can say my childhood was very interesting because we had so many things to do. None of the fun things that are available now were available then, but we had fun. We were never left out of anything. We always felt like we were part of what was going on.
We had a lot of fun when we were kids because we would make our own fun if we didn't have anything else to do. But our mother encouraged us always to read. She helped us with our homework and showed us how to draw maps and things like that. So we had a lot of fun when we were kids growing up.
There were many things that we just took for granted, and I don't think, being small kids, we didn't look at it as segregation.
Because the house right up there was blacks, and all down here were Chicanos. Down on the end of Tornillo, a black family lived. Over there on May, a black family lived. So it was no real black neighborhood. They were just, I guess wherever they could buy a house, they bought it. So they knew all these kids and they played together, but they couldn't go to school together until '54.
As far as really feeling segregation, I felt more after I came to Albuquerque than I did in Las Cruces. We knew that we went to separate schools and we went to separate churches and that sort of thing, but our relationship along with people and our friends was just tremendous.
When I think of Phillip Chapel, I think of a place that was good to go to, and we went to Sunday school when we were little children, and we had a very good teacher. Her name was Ms. McCarroll, and all the kids loved her, and we had a good time at church.
Church is located at 638 North Tornillo. The church is 100 years old, but it's now being repaired by a construction class from Diana Branch and with volunteers. The church was a social center. People went there for all black denominations. They had socials and box suppers and everything like that. One of the policies in the church is when the child, as soon as the child is born, they christen the child or they dedicate the child's life to Christ. The church represents history. It also represents unity in the community, because for a long time this was the only black church or the only place that blacks could congregate and have their social events and religious events and things like that. So it was a gemstone in the community for a number of years. I don't want to see change. I don't want to see restoration. They're restoring it as much as possible to the original structure. Although we have made changes, we've added the electric lights and the fans. We've lowered the ceilings and all of those things. But we did those before we got nominated as on the National Registry. You feel sad, but you feel glad too, because you see that it can be restored and be in prime condition again after 100 years. And so you feel elated. Anytime you do reconstruction or reconstruction, you have delays and everything, and you have to be aware of that. And so we just have to wait and be patient, because we know one day it'll be finished and it'll be a glorious structure again. It's a long, drawn-out process, because once you begin, you find flaws in the building that you were not aware of before, or flaws in the structure that have to be taken care of before the main repairs are done, and that's what happened in this building. They found that the adobes had deteriorated and needed to be stabilized, and that's what they've done. And took some of the plaster off and replastered in those areas, and they'll have to do that on the east and the north side now. So, you know, restoration is a time-consuming process.
It is the oldest surviving African-American church in the state.
Our assignment was to find a building in Las Cruces to nominate to the National Register.
Now that's a statewide historic preservation committee that oversees the state's policies and procedures for historic preservation. Professor Fielder has had a varied life. And what I mean by that is he's a decorated veteran of the Army from his service during the Korean War in the early 1950s.
I got to Korea on the 15th of July, 1951, and I got shot on October 25th, 1951, so I was only there 3.5 months. We had to go across this valley and be over there ready to blow the lead bunker at daybreak at 6 o'clock. And then we had a suicide squad. The guys volunteered for that. And they got there and they blew the bunker, but the concussion from the explosives paralyzed them. And we went on across, and we got in the trench with the Chinese, and were moving down and everything like that. And it was because they had been firing direct fire at the trenches, and a lot of them had caved in, and a lot of the guys were in there, trapped in the dirt. And they were just like praying, you know, don't shoot me. We don't know what they were saying. They were saying either Korean or Chinese, we don't know. But we just shot them and just kept going. There was one guy on the end, a sniper, and he had shot some of the guys, so the company commander told me, take the rest of your men and the rest of the second squad and go around and get him. So I stood up to tell the guys, come on, you know, we have to go around this way. And I felt something hit, but I didn't know I had been shot, because there was no pain or nothing. You should get hit. You've been hit in the nuts and all like that, how it feels. That's what it felt like. And so I stood up to tell them to come, let's go, and then they told me, your legs are bleeding. And I said, oh, I'll be okay. I'll walk down to the bottom of the hill. But I was standing, but I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. So the aid man came, and they cut my pants, and they put little bandages on, and they were going to hand carry me down the hill like that. Well, the same sniper that shot me shot one of them in the back of the head, and they dropped me, and the other guy ran. To me, they brainwash you, because you don't realize that, you don't think about, you can get shot out there. They're shooting at you all the time. Right. But you think, you know you're better than them, and you can kill them before they can kill you. And I think that's the attitude of most young officers. They want to be out there. But after you get out there and they shoot at you a few times, you don't want to be there.
He also has been an educator for more decades than he taught here. He was a teacher in the public schools first, before he started teaching here. So you run across some people who say, oh yeah, I had Mr. Fielder in high school, things like that.
All of you who are a friend, a current student, or a past student of Clarence Fielder, please raise your hand.
Professor Fielder's been teaching here since 1970. And I think he maybe missed a couple semesters in there, but by his account, he's taught 78 semesters here at NMSU. That's an incredible number of students, incredible number of semesters. So he's taught quite a lot of people. I don't know how many students he's taught, but let's say he's had 30 students in a class, which I think is kind of low. He told me some classes are 60 or so. It's over 2,000 students.
He has been my teacher for many years. He's my teacher today.
I currently teach Professor Fielder's class, And I got to tell you, the weight that comes with having to teach his class.
So Tim Nelson, who is now teaching the African American survey classes, was at one point Clarence Fielder's student.
He taught a lot of students self-control. And I mean, he really literally taught us self-control. We would get up, you know, well, us guys, the girls would go to get the hall pass to go to the bathroom, so we'd go up there and go to the bathroom. We want to go to the bathroom, so we'd go flirting, right? So I'd go up there, and I'd want to go flirt, go get the hall pass, and, you know, he'd get in his desk, and he'd go like this. He'd go give me a pencil, and then he'd give me a rubber band, and then send me back to my desk. That's why I learned self-control.
The fact that he taught for 78 semesters here, I think, indicates that the university and the history department acknowledge that he's an important part of our history that we taught over the decades, over the last 4 decades. So it'll partly be a university activity, partly it'll be for his family, and just, I mean, how can you let somebody who has taught here for so long go without honoring them? So this is mainly to honor his years of service.
I'm keeping busy. I'm more busy now than I was before, but I enjoy it. And going and talking to the students and sharing history of early Las Cruces, the history of our church, and the things that happened.
New Mexico has a couple of gems. Turquoise is one of them. I think Mr. Fielder is another.
You can say many things about Clarence, but Clarence truly is an educator. You know, he has educated probably more people in this community than anyone I've ever known.
Young man, education is always drawing something within you to bring out to others, teaching others. And he says, I want you to always have good thoughts, and never get angry unless it is righteous. And thirdly, he says, have faith, make sure you observe more, listen more, observe more, and then make sure that you never become egocentric, be humble.
Mr. Fielder, I thank you for letting me be a ripple in that pond because of him I became a teacher, a kindergarten teacher. And I had so many great teachers, but he was so wonderful.
I think you've given us a legacy. We're always going to live with that legacy. I don't know anyone in this room who's done so much than you. So I think some of our African American students, I wanted to give you a gift. So I'm going to miss you, Doc.